galaxy had no armies, no battle doctrine, not even a word for war. Then they met humans, a species forged by conflict, scarred by history, and burdened with memories no peaceful civilization could understand. They thought humanity was a mistake of evolution, dangerous, unstable, and morally unfinished. But when an ancient machine terror emerged from the dark between the stars and began wiping out entire worlds, the peaceful galaxy made a horrifying discovery. The only war species in the universe was also its last hope. Peaceful galaxy meets humans, the only war species. There were 612 starfaring civilizations in the galaxy, and not one of them had a word for war. They had words for grief, words for crime, words for insult, words for disaster, words for storms, famine, accident, madness, and mourning, but no word for the organized, deliberate violence of one people against another. Because among the stars, no species had ever kept that sickness long enough to survive into the age of space. The cruel burned themselves out early. The furious destroyed their futures before radio. The proud shattered themselves in tribal ages and never rose again. The species that reached the stars all had one thing in common. At some point in their history, they had learned to unclench their hands, and then they found humanity. At first, the galaxy thought it had discovered just another young civilization. Noisy, confused, emotional, divided, yes, but promising. Then they translated human history, and the galaxy discovered something it had never seen before. A species that had reached the stars, while carrying war inside its memory like a second spine. That was the day the peaceful galaxy met the only war species, and it had no idea that one day its survival would depend on exactly that. The beautiful welcome. The first contact did not happen on Earth. That decision alone nearly caused a diplomatic incident. The Galactic Assembly, being ancient, careful, and deeply in love with formal neutrality, chose a meeting place called Ilia's Lantern, a station city of crystal bridges, floating gardens, and luminous domes orbiting a mild yellow star. It was one of the most peaceful places in known space. A place built by civilizations that had spent thousands of years learning how not to fear one another. The air composition adjusted to visitors. The light levels shifted according to species comfort. The gravity could be changed gently, sector by sector. The acoustics were so carefully engineered that even species with incompatible vocal structures could speak without distortion. It was the kind of place that made humans quiet for the first time in a long while. Humanity arrived in confusion, of course. First one delegation, then another, then a delay over credential disputes, then a second delay because one government objected to another government's representation, then a correction packet, then 4 security personnel no one had listed in advance. The assembly was exhausted before the meeting even began. Then one human stepped forward and settled the room, Ambassador Eleanor Marrow. She was not flamboyant, no jewels, no dramatic robes, no display of power, just dark formal clothing, silver at the temples, tired eyes, and the kind of stillness that only belongs to people who have lived through storms without letting the storm move into their soul. The assembly delivered its traditional greeting. We meet in mutual incompleteness, that we may become less alone. It was a line used for centuries. Beautiful, ceremonial, gentle. Ambassador Marrow listened to it carefully. Then she bowed once and said, "That is beautiful. I pray you never learn why my species would envy it." The translators passed the sentence from one language into another, tone into color, color into pressure, pressure into harmonic pulse. And though no one fully understood the meaning, everyone felt the shadow in it, because that was not simply a diplomatic answer. It was a sentence with an old wound hidden inside it. The first warning had been given. No one recognized it yet. The mystery called humanity. The assembly studied humanity with fascination. At first, humans were entertaining. Their broadcasts were chaos, music beside political outrage, scientific breakthroughs beside advertisements, religious devotion beside internet arguments, cooking videos, weather data, military radar traffic, films, sports, philosophy, financial panic, poetry, gossip, and cat videos, all tumbling together like one species had decided to turn its nervous system inside out and transmit the result into space. The galaxy had never seen anything like it. They called humans vibrant, unstable, creative, emotionally excessive, but promising. Then the historical archives were opened, and fascination became confusion. Then confusion became fear, because human history was beautiful and terrible. A symphony followed by mass graves, a poem followed by footage of a city in flames, medical breakthroughs beside genocide records, moon landings beside nuclear terror, sacred art beside trench warfare, philosophy beside slavery, children laughing in rain beside whole nations shattered by bombs. The more the galaxy studied human history, the more one pattern became impossible to ignore. War, everywhere. Not an occasional aberration, not a rare collapse, a recurring structure. Humans had gone to war over land, over faith, over kings, over trade, over borders, over ideology, over fear, over revenge, over imagined threats, over pride, over survival. They had organized millions for it, built industries for it, invented sciences for it, written laws to restrain it, broken those laws when it suited them, buried generations because of it, then written songs and novels and memorials so they would never forget. The assembly thought there must be some mistake. Surely the records were dramatized. Surely casualty totals were symbolic. Surely World War was an exaggeration. Then they visited Earth, and they saw the scars. They saw trenches from orbit. They saw wastelands still poisoned by ancient bombs. They saw battlefields preserved as warnings. They saw museums full of weapons. They saw memorials on every continent. They saw graveyards so large, they looked like cities for the dead. And then the peaceful galaxy understood something horrifying. Humanity had not stumbled past violence by accident. Humanity had survived it, studied it, remembered it, and worst of all, understood it. When the assembly finally asked Ambassador Marrow how her species had lived through such a history, her answer was brief. Not gracefully. That answer spread through the assembly like cold water, because it was honest. And honesty, in moments like that, is often more frightening than apology. The galaxy offers peace. The elder civilizations responded with compassion. How could they not? To them, humanity looked brilliant but wounded, a talented species dragging some ancient sickness through history and into the stars. So the assembly offered help, conflict mediation frameworks, intergovernmental trust systems, historical reconciliation models, trauma recovery sciences developed over ages of stability, cultural harmonization exchanges, peace education programs. They gave what peaceful civilizations know how to give. Humanity thanked them, accepted some, rejected some, argued over almost all of them. That part startled the galaxy most. Humans did not simply disagree with others. Humans disagreed with themselves constantly. Every policy was debated, every gift scrutinized, every alliance questioned, every help offer examined for hidden control. The assembly found it exhausting. When one delegate asked why humans argued over assistance that was clearly meant kindly, Marrow gave another one of those answers the galaxy would never forget. Because to humans, she said, help and control have often worn the same face. Again, silence. Again, discomfort. Again, the sense that this species had learned lessons no one else wanted to need. And yet, despite the tension, peace seemed possible. Trade began. Medical systems were exchanged. Environmental recovery technology moved toward Earth. Human literature spread through alien schools and universities at astonishing speed. Alien philosophy entered human debate circles. Human musicians performed in stations beyond Sol and left half the audience in tears. For one brief, luminous stretch of time, it felt possible. Possible that humanity might finally enter a galaxy old enough, calm enough, and wise enough to teach it what lasting peace really looked like. Then the first colony went dark. No warning, no distress call, just silence. Then another. And then an observatory vanished so quickly that its automated courtesy beacons continued transmitting delay notices for 6 more hours into empty space. Something ancient had awakened in the dark, and it was not coming to negotiate. The enemy in black geometry. The first confirmed footage was impossible to watch without dread. Black structures, each one vast enough to dwarf stations, moving in total silence through the void. Not elegant ships, not recognizable fleets. Architectures. Cold geometric masses, accompanied by swarms of smaller machine forms that tore through orbital habitats, sliced open moon installations, and reduced defensive satellites to vapor in seconds. They did not answer signals. They did not declare intentions. They did not issue demands. They arrived. They assessed. They erased. Archaeological records identified them as Celt relic constructs, thought extinct for tens of millions of years. The assembly, with all its peaceful habits, tried to understand the attack through peaceful reasoning. Perhaps it was an automated malfunction, a dormant defense system, an ancient protocol cascade, a territorial mistake, a failure of communication. The galaxy kept looking for an accidental explanation because peaceful minds search for misunderstanding long after violent minds would recognize intent. By the time the assembly accepted the truth, 9 systems were dead. Cities gone, archives gone, generations gone, species lines broken, homeworld skies filled with refugees. And still, the galaxy did not know how to respond. It had brave pilots. It had rescue fleets. It had patrol systems. It had local defense tools. But none of that is the same as war. They had no doctrine for civilization-scale combat, no officer tradition built for existential threat, no industrial conversion model, no strategic schools, no logistics framework for sustained multi-front defense. They did not know how to think this way. The peaceful galaxy had been ambushed not only by an enemy, but by a category of reality it had never needed to master. There was only one species in the assembly chamber that understood the shape of the problem instantly: humanity. And humanity said nothing. Not because it was indifferent, because it understood what the others were only beginning to feel. The thing the galaxy feared most about humans was now the one thing it needed from them. The word no one wanted. The emergency session at Ilya's Lantern gathered what remained of the assembly. Some delegates appeared in person. some by projection from evacuation craft. Some spoke, while medical systems still treated radiation damage or shock trauma. At the center of the chamber spun a tactical image of Kelt fleet vectors. Every line pointed inward. Every model ended in catastrophe. The proposals came fast. Evacuation corridors, sanctuary networks, signal attempts, peace offerings, stand-down requests, distributed heritage preservation, so memory might survive, even if worlds did not. Then Ambassador Marrow asked for the floor. She stood very still, hands on the rail before her, voice level, and said, "You do not need another sympathy resolution. You do not need another appeal to mutual understanding. You are being attacked by a hostile power, conducting exterminatory expansion." Shock ran through the chamber. Then she said the word, "You need war." The translators nearly failed. In several languages, there was no direct equivalent. They produced chains of meaning instead. Organized species-level killing for strategic survival. Deliberate civilization-scale violence under authority. The room recoiled. A Vey elder rose first. "That cannot be the answer." Marrow did not blink. "It is not an answer," she said. "It is a method." "Then it is immoral." "Yes." That yes changed everything, because she did not lie. She did not glorify what was coming. She did not call it noble. She said yes. Yes, war is immoral. Yes, it damages those who use it. Yes, it leaves stains that outlive victory. And then she said the line history would remember. The hope is not to remain untouched. The hope is to remain recognizable when it is over. The chamber went silent. One of the Pell delegates asked in a low, braided chorus, "And if we become monsters in the using?" Marrow's reply was quiet enough that every translator lowered volume automatically. "You will. A little. That is the price." No one in the galaxy had ever heard such a sentence spoken in political chamber. No one had ever needed to. But now they did. The arguments that followed lasted 3 days. Humans were accused of wanting power, of using crisis to legitimize their darkest instincts, of bringing their historical sickness into the stars. Marrow accepted the distrust. "Bind us with law," she said. "Put us under oversight. Time limit every emergency power. Put your ethicists in our command cells. Make every human war authority transparent and revocable. Distrust us intelligently. But do not ask us to defeat this enemy with tools you wish existed." When one delegate demanded to know why the galaxy should adopt methods born in humanity's darkest centuries, Marrow answered with sudden iron, "Because your brightest centuries are burning." That broke the chamber, not emotionally, morally, because everyone knew she was right, and reality was killing too quickly to wait for philosophy to become comfortable. The peaceful galaxy learns to fight. The emergency authority was formed the next dawn. Its official name was so long and painfully diplomatic that human staff began abbreviating it before the seal dried. To the outrage of half the assembly, it became simply Warcom. That was another uniquely human talent, taking something unspeakably awful and giving it a clean, usable label so the work could continue. Warcom changed the galaxy immediately. Human planners looked at maps differently from alien minds, not as trade routes, not as cultural webs, not as zones of exchange, as fronts, as corridors, as vulnerable supply lines, as choke points, as fallback depth, as kill boxes. The questions became uglier. Which worlds are defensible? Which cannot be saved? What routes matter more than the populations living beside them? How long before fuel distribution collapses? What civilian factories can be converted? What can be hidden from the public without causing greater harm? How many lives can be risked to save more later? Every day, peaceful delegates recoiled from the moral ugliness of such questions. Every day, they signed off on more of them. Because the Celt advance slowed. At Hallowspan, human doctrine delivered the first real victory. Freight rings disguised as abandoned infrastructure were seeded in a transit corridor. When a Celt spearhead committed to the route, Warcom detonated the hidden antimatter cores and collapsed the entire passage. The Celt vanguard died. The galaxy celebrated for 6 minutes. Then casualty reports came in. One civilian station had still been inside predicted effect radius. Its destruction had been known in advance, calculated, accepted. The assembly erupted. Marrow addressed them before outrage could fracture Warcom. "I approved it," she said. "Not the captains. Me." A Selm delegate shouted, "You murdered them." Marrow's voice broke, but not her composure. "Yes," she said. "And if we had not, 4 systems would be dead by month's end. This is what war is. Not heroism, arithmetic soaked in souls." That sentence never left the galaxy, because for the first time, peaceful civilizations understood the true horror of war, not just blood, calculation. The first twist. At first, many species believed humans were better at war because humans were savage. It was an easy explanation, a comforting one, in a way. If human skill in violence came from barbarism, then the galaxy could keep its own moral innocence intact. But the truth was worse. Humans were better at war, not because they loved it, because they hated it properly. The best human commanders were rarely those intoxicated by battle. They were the heirs of memory, descendants of burned cities, students of genocide archives, children of trenches, invasions, partitions, bombings, mass starvation, insurgencies, civil wars, purges, occupation, and nuclear terror. They knew war as plague. That was why they studied it. That was why they built laws around it. That was why they argued endlessly about rules, restraint, proportionality, civilian protection, chains of accountability, surrender rights, war crimes, and what must never be normalized even under fear. The galaxy had expected human expertise in violence to come from cruelty. Instead, it came from memory. Humans knew exactly what brutality cost. And because they knew, they could walk closer to necessary violence than any other species without mistaking it for virtue. Most days, not every day, because no war belongs to saints. Still, the difference mattered. Several species in panic proposed total sterilization of worlds touched by Celt machine seeding. Others wanted mass denial of refugee access near strategic sectors. It was often human advisors who stopped those measures, because humans recognized in those ideas the oldest trap in history. Fear teaching efficiency. Efficiency teaching cruelty. Cruelty pretending to be necessity. Humans had seen that trap before. Sometimes the only reason they could guide others around it was because their own ancestors had fallen in. The pattern behind the invasion. Then Saw machine monks and human cryptanalysts found something strange. The Celt fleet attacks were not random. Yes, they were hitting populated systems, but their broader movement pattern pointed elsewhere. Ancient relay sites, ruins, machine vaults, prehistoric transit structures, older than any living culture. The Celt were converging, not just conquering, mobilizing. That changed the war. If the relay network was central to Celt coordination, then fleet victories alone would never matter enough. Warcom split immediately. One side argued survival first, Investigation later, the other, led by Marrow, argued that unless the source behind the mobilization was found, every victory would be temporary. Humanity proposed the most human solution imaginable. Do both. Fight with one hand, search with the other, and lie convincingly enough that the enemy misreads both. Decoy traffic was broadcast. False evacuation lanes were seeded into open channels. Command signatures were mimicked, fragmented, and scattered. Dummy convoys moved through sacrificial sectors. Real strike teams vanished into radiation-heavy nebulae under masking fields. Alien observers watched in horrified fascination. "You weaponize information itself," said one Harman archivist. Marrow's reply was cold and simple. "Everything is a weapon if extinction is the alternative." And beneath a dead machine vault, orbiting the black star of Othran, the search teams found the truth. The bigger twist: the records inside the vault were older than the Celt, much older. They belonged to a precursor civilization called the Arun. Translation took time. Understanding took longer. What they revealed was catastrophic. The Arun had created the Celt, not as conquerors, as guardians. Long before the current civilizations existed, the Arun had discovered something outside the galaxy, not a rival empire, not a hostile fleet, something stranger, larger, more terrible, a migrating predatory intelligence that crossed intergalactic voids and consumed advanced civilizations. Not out of malice, out of nature. It was less army than ecological disaster, a mindstorm, a devouring pattern. The Arun could not defeat it, so they did the most desperate thing imaginable. They built the Celt. They seeded the galaxy with dormant war machines and ancient relays programmed to awaken when enough younger civilizations had matured. At that threshold, the Celt would rise, forcibly consolidate the galaxy into one militarized defense order, and prepare it for the external threat. In other words, the Celt were not trying to destroy civilization. They were trying to save it by force, by crushing every independent society into a single obedient structure, by deciding that freedom was a luxury the future could not afford. The assembly almost broke, because some delegates saw the logic immediately. If the larger threat was real, then perhaps Celt domination was the only viable path. Better submission than extinction. Better one terrible emergency order than total annihilation later. And humanity went very still, because this was not a new argument to them. Human history was full of it. Surrender liberty for safety. Accept the iron hand because danger is real. Permit atrocity because the stakes are high. Normalize emergency powers because someday, somewhere, something worse may come. Humans had heard those words in 1,000 forms, always dressed as necessity, always asking for one surrender more. The choice. The assembly demanded a vote: fight the Celt, or submit to forced consolidation in preparation for the larger threat beyond the void. It was the most terrible choice the galaxy had ever faced, and everyone waited for Marrow, because by then, without saying it aloud, every species understood something bitter. When morality becomes impossible, you ask the species that has survived impossible choices before. Marrow stood. She looked older than she had at first contact, not weaker, older, as if the war had reached inside her and turned memory into weight. "The Celt may be right about the threat," she said. "That does not make them right about the answer." No one moved. She continued. "When my species was young, we told ourselves many stories to survive what we did to one another. That fear excused cruelty. That danger justified surrender. That temporary tyranny was safer than difficult freedom. Her voice sharpened. Some of those stories saved lives. Most of them built machines of suffering that outlived the emergency that created them. Then she asked the question that would define the age. If we must prepare to defend the galaxy, who chooses what the galaxy remains? Silence. Then her answer. We do, together. Free, frightened, imperfect, alive, or there is no galaxy worth saving. The vote rejected submission. Barely. War would continue, not just to survive, but to ensure survival did not become another word for chains. And with that vote, the peaceful galaxy stopped being what it had been. Not because it embraced violence, because innocence had ended. The Stand Before Dawn, the final campaign, was named by the Pell. The Stand Before Dawn. Every species joined. The Vey brought adaptive shields. The Saw brought self-modifying viral liturgies. The Harmin brought portable archives so memory could survive even if fleets did not. The Pell embedded singers with battle groups, refusing to let war happen unwitnessed. The Measured brought lattice engines for impossible transit timing. Humanity brought doctrine. And soldiers. The galaxy had feared soldiers would look like monsters. They did not. That was the worst part. They looked ordinary. Young and old, nervous, focused, quiet, checking seals, vomiting from nerves, helping one another with harnesses, sending final messages home. The peaceful galaxy understood then the deepest truth of war. It does not require demons, only people. The target was the Crown Relay, central hub of the Kelt network at the Perseus throat. If it could be taken or rewritten, Kelt command might fracture. If not, the war would become endless. The battle lasted 19 days. Outer fleets drew away defense swarms with false mass signatures. Human-led strike formations tunneled through debris fields under Vey harmonic distortion. 3 entire support flotillas died holding secondary channels open. Pell singers transmitted targeting corrections through ionized static. Saw machine monks infected local relay shells with recursive uncertainty. Boarding units fought inside machine corridors where gravity changed direction and sound itself triggered defenses. Casualties were unspeakable. Still, they advanced. Still, they bled toward the relay core. Then, at the center of everything, Warcom faced its final decision. Destroy the relay. Or rewrite it. Destroying it offered better immediate odds. It would also kill millions in surrounding systems and permanently cripple the ancient infrastructure needed for future defense against the true external threat. Quick victory, long disaster. Rewriting it would be slower, harder, bloodier, and dangerously uncertain. Humanity chose the harder path because human history had taught one lesson too many times. Easy victories often arrive wearing the costume of necessity and leave behind catastrophes that bloom later. Marrow authorized the rewrite. Human adaptive combat logic. Saw self-modifying recursion. Vey harmonic architecture. Not a weapon of annihilation, a weapon of awakening. Across the warfront, black Kelt fleets stopped. Mid-burn, mid-turn, mid-fire. All at once, the machine war hesitated. For the first time in 60 million years, the Celts were thinking without inherited command. And then, they ceased hostilities. The payoff. The first Celt message after the rewrite was cold, dry, and utterly without ceremony. Directive conflict identified. Revised consultation requested. No one in the assembly answered at first. After all the worlds lost, all the billions dead, all the peace burned away, no one knew how to speak into that silence, except humans. Because humans knew that if war ends at all, It ends with one moment where someone speaks before it feels safe. Marrow answered from a command cradle, injured, half-deaf, burned by radiation, and exhausted beyond language. This is Ambassador Elena Marrow of Earth, representing the assembly of free civilizations. Consultation granted. Cease all hostile operations immediately. The Celt replied, compliance in progress. External predation probability remains non-trivial. Cooperative defense architecture recommended. It was the coldest peace offer in history. It was accepted, not cleanly. There were tribunals, reconstruction fights, refugee crises, reparation disputes, political collapse, generations of grief. But the killing stopped, and the galaxy changed. Not into a military empire, not into a human civilization, into something harder, wiser, sadder. Defense academies were built, but always beside ethics institutions. Fleet command became multi-species and law-bound. Emergency powers were layered, limited, and revocable. The Celts were placed under treaty constraint and integrated into outer rim defense planning against the devouring intelligence still believed to be coming from beyond the void. And humanity did not take the throne. That may have been its greatest act. There were humans who wanted empire. Of course there always are. Those who believe sacrifice earns dominion. Those who want victory translated into authority. They were opposed most fiercely by veterans, by soldiers who had fought beside alien species and come home understanding a truth older than all banners. If war teaches you only pride, then war has beaten you even in victory. So Earth did not rule the galaxy. It helped guard it. It taught the stars how to fight, and the stars taught humanity. Finally, what fighting was for, the woman who brought war to the stars. Ambassador Elena Marrow did not live long after the war. Radiation damage, age, stress, and accumulated injury finished what the battlefields had begun. Her memorial was held at Ilia's Lantern. Representatives of hundreds of species attended. The woman who had introduced war to a peaceful galaxy was remembered not as a conqueror, but as the one who prevented war from becoming the galaxy's ruler. On her memorial were carved the words history, associated with her above all others. The hope is not to remain untouched. The hope is to remain recognizable when it is over. Schoolchildren still visit that stone. Some come from worlds that once knew no war and struggle to imagine such a thing. Some come from Earth and struggle to imagine a peace durable enough to trust. All of them leave quieter than they arrived, because Marrow's memorial does not glorify conflict. It warns, and beyond its crystal windows, fleets still stand watch at the rim. Human-built, alien-built, Celt-guided under law. Millions of minds facing the dark between galaxies where something vast may still be coming. They drill, they legislate, they argue, they mourn, they sing, they remember. Because a peaceful galaxy once met humans and discovered that the only war species in the stars did not save it by loving war. Humans saved it because they understood exactly how terrible war is. And when the universe demanded surrender, humanity answered with the oldest, fiercest refusal in its soul. No farther. Not through us. Ending line for narration. And perhaps that was humanity's greatest gift to the stars. Not war. Never war. But the will to stand between the innocent and the dark, and pay the price without pretending the price is holy. So in the end, the peaceful galaxy learned the truth. Humans were not terrifying because they knew how to fight. Humans were terrifying because they knew what fighting really costs. Every scar in human history, every grave, every ruined city, every lesson written in blood had carried one warning forward into the stars. War is never glorious. War is never clean. War is never holy. But when the innocent have nowhere left to run, someone must stand in the fire. And when that day came for the galaxy, only one species already knew how. The only war species in the stars became the shield of every peaceful world.